engineering that went into cutting the stones and placing the stones together. Can you imagine the coordinated effort it took to transport the stones, to manage the crews necessary for constructing this? We're talking about an architectural marvel, sisters and brothers, that we don't see anywhere else in the world. Next slide. It's also important, can you give me some focus on that too? It's also important to identify certain faces with specific points of time in history, particularly now that folk want to claim that Egypt was this multicultural environment. It was after it had been conquered by the foreigners, and that was very late in the history of ancient Kemet. Thousands of years after. Thank you. We can't have it all, but we do the best we can. It's important for you to see this face and to know that this is Zoser, a king of Kemet, a man who during his reign was one of the most powerful men on earth, commanded the mightiest army on the face of this planet, was one of the wealthiest men on the earth. We can still tell that he is a brother, even though his nose is missing. And that's no accident. We'll talk a little bit about missing noses and lips later on in this presentation. Can we have the next slide, brother? Here we see three structures which represent the most important archaeological site on the planet. It is at Giza where you can find this selection of pyramids, the most significant of which is in the background here. This is Khufu's pyramid, a structure which, from the time that it was built, approximately 2500 BCE, up until 109 years ago, this building was the tallest man-made structure on Earth. It covers an area of 13 acres, 3.5 blocks wide by 3.5 blocks wide by 3.5 blocks wide by 3.5 blocks wide. Rises to a height of 450 feet, as tall as a 45-story building. This one building is comprised of over 2.5 million stone blocks, which weigh an average of 2.5 tons each. There are 5 stones inside of this building that weigh 70 tons, as much as a railroad locomotive. And the technology does not exist today to move a stone that weighs 70 tons. I want you to understand something about the technological greatness that existed thousands of years ago that cannot be duplicated today. There was enough stone in this great pyramid of Khufu to make 30 Empire State Buildings. Do you understand what you are seeing, sisters and brothers? And you must also understand that this building was not built by slave labor, nor was it built by so-called Jews when they were enslaved in Africa. Because as Doc Ben has said on numerous occasions, this structure was built over 1,000 years before the first Jew, Abraham, was born. This is a reality. So again, you have to understand why the Europeans are unwilling to give up Kemet. Because this is a testimonial to the greatness of the minds of African men and women. It is a testimonial to what you can do when you get that little white man out the back of your mind, when you resurrect your African consciousness and recreate your greatness. Next slide, please. Now, you all know what this statue is, don't you? What is it? All right. Now, I hear several different names, and let's deal with that issue right now because it's important for us to realize that most of the names of African people, places, and things have been renamed by non-African people. The word pyramid is not an African word. The word pharaoh is not an African word. The word Egypt is not an African word. The word Sphinx is not an African word. This is a statue of Heru on the horizon. It is an image, and there are many scholars who, upon re-examination of this statue, there are now many scholars who believe that this was the oldest sculpture ever carved by human beings. It has been dated to have been built somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 years ago. It has the face of Heru, the son of God, and the body of a lion. And one of the things that you must understand when it comes to interpreting African objects is that we must begin to see them through the eyes of African people. Many of the things that African people have created were symbolic, and that in order to truly understand what they represent, you cannot take the image literally. Of course, we know that the lions don't have human heads. So what possibly could this statue represent? The head on this body of the lion is the head of Heru, the son of God. It represents divine intellect. The lion's body represents the animal nature that exists within all human beings. Think about this reality. We, to this very day, still use very colorful metaphors to describe animal tendencies that human beings sometimes exhibit. Brothers will see a nice sister and they'll call her, look at that nice fox, look at that chick. You know, you invite someone over to your house and they have poor table manners. You'll accuse them of eating like a pig. Sisters, all too often, and sometimes rightfully so, will accuse brothers of dogging them, using animal metaphors to describe animal tendencies that we sometimes exhibit. So what is a lion? The lion has been regarded as the king of the beasts, represents the king of this animal nature. But if you look at this statue, the statue which is 240 feet long, 66 feet high, you'll see that the body of this lion is sitting down very calmly, very cool, which means that the lower animal nature is now under the control of an educated and refined mind. It is through the development of your intellect that you can conquer the beast that dwells within. That is what this statue represents. And it is because African people understood the essence of who we are and what it takes to elevate our God consciousness that they were able to create 5,000 years ago things that cannot be duplicated today. And that power still exists within you right now. Next slide, please. Here's a close-up of that face. Heru. The face of the statue, 13 feet, 8 inches wide. It is the head of Heru, the son of the resurrected God, Asar. It's also important for us to understand the reality, as I heard someone mention in the audience, that it is no coincidence that this statue is missing its nose and its lips. We know specifically that in July of 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte came to Egypt in the first leg of his journey to conquer the world. He came to Egypt because he had always held this ancient civilization in very high regard. So Napoleon assumed that if he could conquer Egypt and rediscover some of the greatness of the ancient Egyptians, this would assist him in his quest to conquer the rest of the world. So then imagine Napoleon's surprise when he comes upon this statue of Heru, the statue which still today sits in a pit below ground level. And it was at that time in 1798 literally buried up to his neck in sand. And the only image that Napoleon saw staring down upon him was this 13-foot, 8-inch wide head of an African, of a brother. And Napoleon was unable to accept the historical reality that he was confronted with. He therefore instructed his soldiers to take the cannons and shoot the nose and the lips off of this statue. Napoleon is also responsible for giving us a statement that history is a lie agreed upon. And I submit to you all this evening, sisters and brothers, that when it comes to telling the history of the story of African people, the general consensus has been to lie, to say that you have no history, you have no culture. But if you are willing to do the homework, then you can pull the covers off of the lies. All right? Next slide. Let me share with you one process. On the right here is a photograph of 1/30th of the beard of Heru. This segment, this fragment of the beard, is now on display in the British Museum in London. This is a portion of the original beard. The shadow pieces of the face of Heru, the nose and lips, are in the basement of the British Museum, and they're not on display. But this portion of the beard is. I want you to understand that this is the original beard. It was broken into at least two pieces, and you can see here where it's been fused back together. The image on the left is a copy of this beard. The copy is in the Cairo Museum. So the Europeans have the original, and the Egyptians have a copy. Again, I want you to identify the copy because it is seamless. Okay, you don't see this broken segment here. Make a mental note of this slide because I'm going to refer to it a little bit later on. Okay, next slide. Now, this, sisters and brothers, is a sphinx. This is a Greek sphinx. The word sphinx is a word. If you were to go home this evening, pull out your dictionary and look up the word sphinx, you'll find that the word sphinx means the strangler. The word sphinx means to strangle or to hold. The story of the sphinx comes from the Greek and the story of Oedipus Rex, King Oedipus. The story of Oedipus is the story of this winged monster that had the head and breast of a woman and the body of a lion that was perched on a cliff alongside of the road that led to the city of Thebes in Greece. And this sphinx would ask a question of every person who wandered down that road. And that question was known as the riddle of the Sphinx. This riddle was nothing more than a metaphor for the human experience. The riddle was what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening. And the more legs that it walks on, the weaker it becomes. Whoever this Sphinx put this riddle to, when they could not answer the riddle, they were strangled by the Sphinx. Hence the association of the word Sphinx meaning the strangler or to strangle or to hold. Why does the Sphinx have the head of a woman? Because the Greeks believed that women were inherently inferior to men. The Greeks believed the women were evil. The Greeks legitimized the concept of homosexuality because they believed that the greatest love that a man could ever have is with another man. And still believe that, yeah. Unfortunately, so do some confused brothers believe that as well. But listen, according to the story of the Sphinx, this monster killed everyone, strangled everyone who could not answer the riddle. The only person who successfully answered that riddle was a man by the name of Oedipus, who, realizing that the riddle was a metaphor for the human experience, thought about it and said that the correct answer is man. Man, as a child, in the morning of his life, crawls on 4 legs. As an adult, in the afternoon of his life, stands erect on 2 legs. And in the evening, as an elder, walks with a cane on 3 legs. So after having given the correct answer to the riddle, the Sphinx then commits suicide by jumping off of a cliff. Oedipus then goes into the city of Thebes, where he proceeds to murder his father, marries and has sex with his mama. Now, this is the Greek interpretation. And to this very day, those psychiatrists who follow Freud's line of thinking have classified a psychological disorder called the Oedipus complex, and they mistakenly believe that every man wants to have sex with his mama. That's European garbage. That's nonsense. I want you to take note here of another reality. Brother, can you fine-tune this slide again? Here, in this profile of the Sphinx, you see that the tail of this lion does not end with the ball of fur like it does on the statues of Heru and Kemet. The tail on this Sphinx ends with a serpent's head. So here we see the first interpretation of women with the serpent and both being evil. This is where the concept comes from. And it's also important to understand that even today in the medical profession, they describe muscles in the body that restrict the flow of something. They call them, after this statue, they call them sphincter muscles. The pupil of your eye is a sphincter muscle. When you walk from a darkened room outside into the light, your sphincter muscle or your pupil contracts to limit the amount of light coming into your eye. You all right now are sitting on a sphincter muscle, an anus.